karat gold got caught in my teeth.
A little crunchy.
You know, so it was a little problem there, you know.
Did it get caught in your gold teeth?
Yes, it did, as a matter of fact, yes. I wish I had $1,000 for ice cream. I wouldn't spend it there anyway. Anyway, you know, ever since the beginning, from Cain and Abel on, you know, we've been playing one-upmanship, which is basically what
Cain worked on Wall Street?
Well,
Yeah, you didn't know that?
No wonder it killed it.
Yeah, it's
since Cain and Gingrich? Same difference.
It was Herman Cain.
Yeah,
Same Herman Cain killed Abel.
You know, and just never forget, you know, that when capitalism reached its peak, its best, when capitalism was really running great, was for the centuries, and I do mean centuries and centuries of slavery. Then it was really
That was capitalism.
Yeah, you know, it's the best.
Labor costs were cheap.
And that continued, you know, up until only a few hundred years ago, really, honestly. Up to a few hundred years, 200 years ago, less than 200 years ago, 3/4 of the world's population was in slavery. That doesn't happen by accident.
You know what the undocumented fruit pickers are getting right now, buddy? Slavery is not over.
Probably less.
Yeah, well, you know, what's his name?
Often got housing.
Perry in Texas. You know, I mean, he's basically the slave wage king.
Oh, yeah, right.
Texas has the lowest paid workers next to Mississippi, one state worse. Anyway,
I have sent out our second tweet.
good.
Raucous DC.
Good. Things changed a little bit after World War II, partially with the pressure from communism and the 2 world wars, and we got to look at things a little bit differently, and so much horror that we needed some compassion built into the system. A little bit happened here in the U.S., and a lot happened in Europe. And for a while, frankly, the super rich seemed to retreat, or so it seemed. But then we had the 60s. The slaves were gaining power. And I don't mean the 1860s, I mean the 1960s.
Which one were you involved in?
Both.
Yeah.
Yes, I was a leader then too. And the rich began to ramp up their greed machine using their favorite tool, capitalism. Ask not what you can do for your country, only ask how the hell you can make a profit. That's the American model, by the way. Wouldn't be so bad, but they convinced people, and this is crucial, they convinced the American people that greed is good.
You mean it isn't?
Greed, well, it is if you're in the 1%.
Yeah.
Greed is good in sports, it's good in finance, and really this is their top achievement, it's good in churches. You know, greed is just...
Gotta fund the church.
Greed is just part of our gospel. I mean, it's really, you know, phenomenal the way they've achieved that.
You know, all that stuff about easier for a candle to drive a needle than a rich man enter heaven. I mean, you know, no Christian ever said that.
No, that's irrelevant. All right, just continue a little bit here. Furthermore, the super rich capitalists now own, I'm not making this up, they own most of the world. They really honestly do, from water to diamonds, from land to government. They won, is the point. I want to give you one example of how it works, just so you understand this. You'll learn more of this from Craig Palace. This is where the information came from. How many of you have you guys heard of Paul Singer? You know who Paul Singer is?
Not right offhand. No.
Well, this is one of the people you're going to learn to love. He's now the topper to all of this. Is Romney's economic advisor.
Makes sense.
All right. Here's how Mr. Singer makes his money and how all of the vultures in the financial market make their money. Remember Corning Glass? You heard that? Used to make asbestos, right? Okay, well, they knew, I should mention also Halliburton, of course.
An environmentally friendly product.
Yeah, they knew that, you know, it was not good stuff for the workers, but they didn't bother telling the workers that.
Workers after they die.
Exactly, you know, the supply is endless.
Destroying Mexicans.
Yeah, they're killing hundreds of workers, and they knew it all along. Finally, the workers, you know, they started dying and having lung cancer and everything else.
How dare they? When they're supposed to be working, doing the job, and they die.
They die, and they get lung cancer, and they don't show up on time. I mean, you know, it's terrible. So anyway, the workers finally figured out, and they sued, right? And they win. It takes years, of course, but they win. They win a settlement. They get a settlement for their suffering.
Damn it, early
deaths. Yeah, not a lot, but they get it. Because of that, Corning damn near collapses. Stocks plummet. Along comes Paul Singer. Never forget this name. One of many. Never forget this name, Paul Singer. And he comes along. Corning's stock is dying, and he, just like the hedge funds run by Romney, Cheney, or involved with Cheney, he buys Corning for a rusty nickel. Frankly, he gets Corning before it goes bankrupt or whatever with this big settlement again. He immediately legally screws the workers, getting a much lower settlement. He lays workers off. He increases the company's debt. But the The American dream, he shows a profit.
I bet he makes a lot of money doing
The stock
that.
goes up and he immediately sells the company for billions. That is the pattern in industry after industry after industry. When it gets to the countries, and I'll leave it for Greg Hollis to explain that, when it gets to what they do to countries, particularly in Africa, it is nothing less than capitalistic rape. And, there's nothing that can stop this. This is the real problem. There's no international organization that can stop it. If you try to stop it nationally, they'll just shift their money, shift their operations. There's no way to really regulate them. They are too big to fail. It's never, ever been on this scale before. From the Federal Reserve to the presidency, they're just tools. They're just tools for the capitalist vultures.
Part of it is just the nature of globalization. I mean, it used to be you had to go to Africa, get your slaves, have them come back and work for you. Today you take your company to China and you get your Chinese children to make your products for you at 10 cents a day or whatever if you want to pay them, or India or Mexico or wherever the corporations go.
Well,
you don't even have to worry so much about feeding and housing them anymore. You may have to beat them every now and then, but you have to beat the slaves too.
Yeah, right.
So for a capitalist, life is pretty good.
It works pretty good. And this is my real point. I mean, there's some point. Every phase, every era has its own systemic problems and systemic operations of economics, etc. We really honestly need to find a different way of doing business. We really honestly
There's the rub.
There's the rub.
I'm gonna get you back.
Oh, I know. I know this. Mark is a capitalist. I want to announce that.
I do not believe in pure socialism. That's true, but we'll get to that.
Okay.
First, I want to hear
Garland.
Garland.
A new capitalism. What is it?
Well, here's the thing about it. To get down to the nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
Pure capitalism, if we were in pure capitalism, the government would know anything.
That's right.
That's the way it is with hedge funds.
And in pure socialism, the government owns
There'd be no private.
everything. There's no private industry. I mean, countries that people call such as China. China is state capitalism.
Yeah, China is definitely not
One correction. That's not pure socialism. That would be pure communism.
Right.
Socialism never goes
Right. But I mean, so right now, what's happening, I think, in our society and what has happened throughout the so-called industrialized nation has been, and I'm with Mark. I think we need.
What?
I think we need a mix.
What did you say? We need a mixture of the two.
Healthy mixture. But what's happened?
That's right. We're both against you.
What has happened is this. Our society, both, and keep in mind, forget the United States, because for these multinational corporations and for the top 1%, there are no countries for them.
That's right.
So here's what's happened.
There's no loyalty.
They have taken our industrialized society closer and closer and closer to pure capitalism, because when you get to pure capitalism, it benefits the most wealthy. The smaller the government, the more it benefits the most wealthy. When you get into a larger government with more safety net and more things, if you're very, very poor, the government can provide services.
How do you stop it? When they own the damn world and the
that's the
politicians.
question. I think this is what I think. You can't stop it. It has to stop itself by collapsing, which, I don't know if you've looked around, I think that's what we're in the process of experiencing now.
But as you pointed out, even if it collapses, the super rich aren't hurt.
Because this is bigger than capitalism. What's going on now, it's bigger than just capitalism, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay, Mark?
Look, there's two things, I think, in any economic government system. There's democracy versus a dictator, right? And there's capitalism versus socialism. And I think you can have any mixture.
They don't have to be versus.
China went from a more socialist dictatorship to a more capitalist dictatorship. They're still a dictatorship.
Yeah.
People are still not living free. The United States has gone back and forth. We were pretty close to pure capitalism well up into the late 1890s. Then with
an economic collapse.
Things like the Federal Reserve and things like the New Deal and things like Social Security
and
things like
unions
and of course the unions and the collapse of the Great Depression, leading to the need for these reforms. At least people saw the need. We became a much more mixed economy.
You might even use the word compassionate occasionally, a little bit. So
more mixed. We had some compassion. We had the war on poverty under Lyndon Johnson. We had, Medicaid is a compassionate program. The Environmental Protection Agency, under, believe it or not, Richard Nixon, protects our environment. There's a lot of good programs. To me, though, the question isn't, is capitalism over? Kill capitalism My question for that is very simple, Terry. If capitalism is gone, what are you replacing?
That is the question, and that's
To
why
me, the question
that's why I've introduced
I
the
think
topic.
we need to have capitalism carefully watched, carefully policed, the way it was,
How
the
are you going to
60s
do
and
that?
70s.
How are you going to get
We've
control?
actually done some of that.
No,
Let me give you an example.
That's in the past.
Well,
this is not the same situation. That's the point. We are on a scale now that the world has never been on before. Yes, there was,
maybe because of globalization.
Because of polarization and the ability to move money and the ability to control money and hide money. We don't know what the hedge funds are doing. We don't know, what all these
people have
things
been hiding money in different ways,
Not
but
on
for
this-
hundreds of years.
not on this
I
scale.
guarantee you, Uncle Scrooge.
If King Henry is screwing you, which he was, you can find his castle. You really can. And if you really get ticked, you can probably storm his castle. And if you get lucky after you fight off a few thousand soldiers, you might actually do some damage to King Henry. It's exactly what the French did in the French Revolution. Ugly as it was, that's what they did.
I
Today,
hope that's not a model for our future.
today,
Because it didn't end well, even for the
oh yes it did. But anyway, it was ugly, but it ended well. But
There was
today,
a lot of blood spilled.
but today, how do you get control of this? How do you even pass any legislation that will have any effect whatsoever anywhere without an international government?
And that's a good point, Terry. I'd like to expand on what you were saying a little bit. What's happened now, and how do you hide it?
Yeah.
What's happened now through the invention of the internet and all of these complicated financial transactions that the transactions, the way they play with money and play with people's lives has become so complicated that when we have these collapses, when things start going downhill, the average person has no clue how it happened.
And
the average person can't figure out what's going. We can see the results of it. It's kind of like the wind. You can feel the wind, but you can't see it. You can't. Let me just finish. So the average person feels, oh my gosh, I don't have a job and all these bad things going. They see a small percentage of people have everything, but they really have no clue how it happened. And on top of that, the super wealthy can put forth propaganda to convince the average person, well, it was the poor person that did it. So they have the advantage of having complicated ways of screwing us all and taking our money, and then having a media and a powerful propaganda machine to manipulate us and convince us that it was the poor people